Intelligence Committee, Congressman Adam Schiff. Congressman, thank you for joining us this morning. I want to start out, I've got to give you a chance to respond to Sarah Sanders from the White House, just to remind everybody what she said just a few minutes ago in the show. Adam Schiff rarely bases any comments in reality. Talk about a grandstander. He is probably hook, line, and sinker buddies with Jim Comey. They both have never found a TV camera they don't love to be in front of.
I don't think she likes me very much, George. Well, you'd have to believe that the president picked Scooter Libby out of a hat, out of the thousands of people seeking a pardon. This was a complete coincidence. I don't find that the least bit credible. I think the president is sending a message, basically, I will use the pardon power to pardon people even that have been convicted of leaking or obstruction of justice. If you're with me, I have your back. I think this is the very blatant message the president is trying to send. And I'm working on legislation, frankly, that would say that any pardon that the president issues in which he is a potential witness, subject, or target, the files ought to be provided to Congress so the American people can tell whether this is part of an obstruction of justice.
So it's preserved no matter what. And on James Comey, you know, there's been some critics have said that they're concerned that him speaking out now may affect the Mueller investigation in some way. Are you concerned about that?
I'm not concerned about it. I think his statements, as far as I've seen the clips, are very consistent with his testimony, with his memoranda. I've always found him to be very credible, very truthful, and so I think the Twitter attack and any concern about the investigation doesn't concern me. I do think that he made a very serious mistake in discussing the Clinton investigation 2 weeks out and then a few days out.
Releasing the letter.
Releasing the letter, violating the department policy. I think it's interesting. I think he made the same mistake in many respects that the Obama administration made more broadly, and for the same reason. And that is the Obama administration didn't aggressively take on the Russians while their hacking and dumping was going on, while the social media campaign was going on, because in part, I think they felt that, like Comey, Hillary Clinton was likely to win, and that it would feed into Trump's argument that they were rigging the process. So I think both the Obama administration and James Comey made a similar mistake in presuming the outcome.
In fact, Comey quotes President Obama around that time saying that Putin backed the wrong horse, that these assumptions were widespread, not only through the administration, actually through a lot of the country at that time as well. On the broader investigation, you also heard Sarah Sanders say that there's been absolutely no evidence of any kind of collusion that's come forward. In fact, the president's gone farther, said there is no collusion, and that's been concluded by the investigators. You're still investigating.
We're still investigating it, and this is just simply not true. There have been, I think, any number of witnesses and evidence we have found on the issue of collusion. And, you know, the Trump Tower meeting itself, the promise of help by the Russian government, the acceptance of help by the Trump campaign, the secret conversations with George Papadopoulos, all of this is evidence of collusion. Now, it's a separate question whether it's proof beyond a reasonable doubt of a conspiracy to violate U.S. election laws or a conspiracy to defraud the United States. One thing I think was very telling about the last indictment, Bob Mueller's indictment of the Russians, it made no mention of the hacking and dumping operation. Now, why was that not included?
Why?
That indictment is coming, George. It's just a question of whether that indictment includes U.S. persons or not.
And do you credit at all this McClatchy report over the weekend that they say that Mueller has developed evidence that Michael Cohen was indeed in the Czech Republic?
I don't know the answer to that because, like many of the witnesses we brought before our committee, the majority was unwilling to use subpoena power to test whether they were telling us the truth. So we asked the majority, let's subpoena his travel records, let's subpoena his credit card records, let's find out where he was in Europe when he says that he was in one place. Did he go because there are not necessarily passport records to Prague or somewhere else to have these meetings? The Republicans didn't want to know the answers and wouldn't subpoena those records. So at this point, we don't know the answer, and I hope that the special counsel can find out.
And finally, what is your overall assessment at this point of the Steele dossier? We knew when it was first went public that many of the allegations, not only salacious but unverified. What would you say about the overall credibility of the document today?
Well, you know, certainly some of the information, I think, in the dossier has been corroborated. Others is very difficult to prove or disprove. But I do think that the use of this by the Republicans to suggest that the investigation began with this, which it didn't, to suggest that that the whole investigation should be derailed because of the production of these reports by Christopher Steele, This is an effort simply to put the government on trial and say, no matter how incriminating the evidence may be of the Trump campaign or the Russians, we should throw that out because we don't like how the investigation was initiated, or we take issue with Christopher Steele. That's no reason to ignore what the Russians did, and it's no reason to get in the way of an investigation to what the Trump campaign did.
Schiff, thanks for your time this morning.